Hello and welcome to this, the third in a series of 3 short videos about the breaking the mold process. In the first video, we showed how we can create the environment that allows the workforce to engage by providing them with the feedback that they need to feel valued, to feel respected. This feedback achieves 2 things. The first is it produces a continuous flow of ideas which are the source of the practical changes to the operation. These practical changes in turn are used to calculate the return on investment that demonstrates from day one the immediate added value of the breaking the mold process. The second thing that providing feedback does is it changes the way that the workforce feel about what they do. Providing feedback to the workforce allows them to start to feel proud of what they do. Providing feedback to the workforce allows them to engage. In the second video, we showed what happens when management use directive behavior to try to make the workforce do what they want. But we were also able to show how their engagement can recover from the consequences of that directive behavior. In the third video, this video, I want to show you what an engaged workforce is really capable of. Not just the practical changes they make to their process, but how the change in the way that they feel about what they do affects their ability to perform. For this, I want to tell you a story. We need to go back to the jungle of Venezuela. I'd been on the rig for about 2 months, and everything we'd been doing was showing absolutely marvelous results. And then the tool pusher asked me to take a look at this process called running liner. Now, I should explain a bit about what running liner is about. When we drill an oil well, we drill a hole in the ground. If we try and produce oil from that hole in the ground, the flow of oil erodes the sides, the hole collapses, and we can't produce oil. So what we do is we line it. In this case, we line it with tubulars about 30 feet long and about 7.5 inches in diameter. And the process to do that, we take the first length of liner, the first joint of liner, and we lower it into the well. And when it gets to the level of the table, we clamp it. Then we get the next one, lift it up, screw it in, undo the clamp, lower them down, clamp it, then get the next one, lift it up, screw it in, lower it down, and so on. The wells are about 6,000 feet deep, so we need about 200 joints to get from the deck down to the end of the well. And this operation was measured in the number of joints that went into the well per hour. Now, when I first went to this rig, I spoke to the country manager, and he told me that his target for running liner was 20 joints per hour. And when I said, well, what's current performance? He said current performance was actually about 16 joints per hour. And I said, well, that's only 4 more joints per hour. I didn't see why he needed me. And then he had a quick smile and he said, well, actually, it's because 16 joints per hour is the fastest that this rig has ever run liner. The real rate that they run at, the average, is way below that. That's why we need you. So I said, okay, but while I'm here, what is the world record for running liner? What's the best you've ever seen? And the country manager had to think, and he said, well, once I'd seen liner run in Europe with an experienced crew, and they achieved 25 joints per hour, but that was on an automatic rig. The rig we are talking about was a manual rig. So I said, okay, I'll have a look. And I went out to the rig and I asked the crew exactly the same questions that I asked them for any other operation. We talked about running the liner, and I said, what is it makes this job difficult? And what do you want to do to change that? These guys were perfectly aware of the process, but they sat there and they couldn't think of a single thing that they could do that was different to this operation. So eventually I said, okay, well, you'd better go back to the rig. Don't worry, you don't always have to come up with new ideas. So they went back, and the next time that they ran liner, they ran at 18 joints per hour. 2 joints faster than they had ever run before. So I spoke to them again, and I said, okay guys, you must be doing something different because you're running 2 joints faster than before. And the guys sat there again and they scratched their heads and they said, well, we've no idea what's different. We can't think of anything different. Everything's there, everything works. No idea. So I said, okay, on you go, and they went back to work. The next time they ran liner, they ran at 24 joints per hour. 24 joints per hour. It's not beyond the bounds of possibility that if 24 joints per hour is the average that they were running, that they were actually peaking at 25 joints per hour and achieving on a regular basis the world record. And let me put that into context. These guys on this rig were Venezuelan jungle Indians with only about 6 months experience running a rig. The world record had been set by experienced European and North American drillers on an automatic rig in Europe. And yet here these guys were regularly achieving the world record on a manual rig in the middle of the Venezuelan jungle with inexperienced Indians. So I had to call them in and say, what are you guys doing differently? Our performance has leapt from 16 joints per hour to 24 joints per hour. You must be doing something different. And the guys sat there and scratched their heads. They couldn't think of a single thing that they were doing differently. But I knew what was different because I'd been looking for it. When they're running at 16 joints per hour, I used to go up on the drill floor and I used to talk with the roustabouts and the roughnecks. And we used to lean on the rail and look out and count parrots. And when the driller wanted the crew to come and help to put the clamp on to spin up the next pipe, he used to stop the pipe and he would shout at them and say, hey, come on, give me some help. And the guys would go, yeah, okay. And they would go and they would help and they would screw it in. And then when they finished, they would come back and restart the conversation. When they were running at 24 joints per hour, I would be on the drill floor talking, chewing the fat with the roughnecks and the roustabouts. But now, the only difference was that the crew, instead of looking out at the jungle, were looking in at the drill pipe as it went down the floor. Now, the driller didn't have to call anyone. As soon as the tubular slowed down, the crew were there with the clamps. As soon as the tubular stopped, clamp was on, new tubular screwed in, clamp was off, and it was on its way down into the well again. Almost no delay. And then they would resume their conversation in exactly the same way as before. Now, nobody had told the crew to stop looking at the jungle. Nobody had told the crew to pay attention to the tubular that was being run in the middle of the floor. All that had happened was we had allowed the crew to care about their own performance. We had allowed them to engage in their performance. And this was the difference between running 16 joints per hour and running at 24 joints per hour, was the difference in the way that they felt about what they were doing. There were no practical changes made to that operation whatsoever. The next liner that was run, they ran at 22 joints per hour, 2 joints less. There was a mechanical failure. The crew were really pretty disappointed because they knew that they could achieve 24 joints per hour. But wait a minute, 22 joints per hour that they were disappointed with were still 2 joints per hour faster than the fastest that their country manager expected them to achieve. After that, they ran at 24 joints per hour. They ran at 24 joints per hour. They ran at 24 joints per hour. Each time at world record speed. World record speed became their own target, not because somebody else had set it for them, but because they felt that they could achieve it. This sort of performance has got nothing to do with Venezuela. It's got nothing to do with the oil industry. It's got everything to do with these people changing the way that they felt about what they were doing. Their world record performance was as a consequence of allowing them to engage in what they were doing. No practical changes whatsoever. This is the sort of performance that is available for anybody anywhere in the world because it's to do with the way that they feel about what they do. And if we make the workforce feel this way about their work, then their performance will become astonishing. Thank you for listening.